The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, this is Salim Khan with TEESI Engineering. Good afternoon to everyone, and thanks for joining in. Today's webinar is about building commissioning, and this will provide an overview of various commissioning processes and that are available out there. This is a series of seminar basically that we've been doing. So this is we have two more tomorrow on slightly different topics, also interesting topics. If you all have some housekeeping stuff, if you all have any questions, you can put them in the chat. And in the end, I think we're going to allocate a few minutes basically for questions and answers if there are any. And I think we'll be sending the slides out in a PDF and potentially the recording of this also in a day or so after from now. So just wanted to let you all know and make you all aware of this. So this presentation is part of the SECO Schools and Local Government Technical Assistance Program. It is a program available to school district at no cost. It provides them some energy consulting services, basically. So this is the result of that. Before we get started and dive deep into the commissioning aspect of it, I wanted to go over just some overall background information, basically, to give you all some idea of why commissioning may be an important aspect in the future. So currently, the U.S. building stock is approximately 300 billion square feet. It is estimated by the year 2035, 52 billion square feet, approximately 17%, will be demolished, basically. So that's an important piece of information. The next piece of information is that existing buildings by the year 2025, 150 billion square feet, approximately 60% will be renovated in one form or another. So you see the existing buildings, some of them being demolished, some being maintained, and some of them will go to a renovation process in the next few years. Therefore, by the year 2035, 3/4 of the U.S. building stock will be new or renovated. Building offer the greatest opportunity for energy conservation, and this is an historic opportunity to improve energy efficiency and promote sustainable building practices. So you could see from this, this is primarily from 2030 Challenge as the source over there, but you can see from this that there's a good opportunity to do commissioning energy efficiency projects into the design and into existing building also to make a difference. This is another just information only kind of a slide that I'd like to go over. The data is probably a few years old, but it hasn't drastically changed. So what you see on the right side is a typical office building. You will see 54% of the energy goes into HVAC, around about 24 into lighting, and the rest into other aspects of the building consuming systems. On the left side is the schools. 62% going into the HVAC, roughly 18% going into lighting, and the rest going to other aspects of it. This is from DOE data. It's a couple of years old, but the overall distribution is very similar even today. So, important piece of information, and I'll come back to this later on just to emphasize why commissioning is done in certain areas and not in all areas. So this is another piece of information that I think the picture speaks for itself. Typically, the tip of the iceberg is the construction cost. And the building life cycle cost, which you see underneath over there, is a huge portion of it. So you only see the tip of the iceberg, but the major cost of running these buildings is very substantial and exceeds the initial cost a couple of times over, basically. To ensure energy efficient design, promoting healthy working environment, and cost saving to energy efficient operation, reduce carbon footprint, good for environment, and system commissioning. So you can help these existing building and new construction projects by actually doing system commissioning, energy efficiency upgrades that are going to reduce the carbon footprint, that's good for the environment, and it has other challenges and opportunities that you ought to be utilizing basically. So the life cycle cost of the facility, understanding of that is very important. Everyone looks at the initial or the construction cost, but the operation and maintenance cost is something that we need to keep an eye on. And system commissionings of existing buildings also is one aspect to address that, to help with that process. I'll briefly define, there are various definitions of commissioning, but I'll define the popular definitions, and then I'll just zoom in on the two types of commissioning. One is the new construction and existing buildings. So in general, the commissioning process is a quality-oriented process for achieving, verifying, and documenting that the performance of the facilities, system, and assemblies meet defined objectives and criteria. This is an ASHRAE Guide 0 definition of it. For new construction and renovation commissioning, in general, commissioning is the process of ensuring that the building performance according to its design intent. So this is important, the design intent and the need of its owners and occupants, basically. So typically the new construction and major renovation, if there's a commissioning process over there, it is ensuring that the design intent is met, basically, right? And that's the primary focus of those type of commissioning projects. An existing building commissioning is a quality-focused process for maintaining the current facility requirements of an existing building and or its systems and assemblies. That's also from ASHRAE Guide 2, 2015. So the difference over here is that in an existing building, you're primarily focused on looking at the current facility needs and making systems and checking system to make sure that the current facility needs are being met, not necessarily what the original design intent was. So one important thing to keep in mind is that commissioning is a process, and it is various steps involved in it, and I'll go over some of these processes with you all. So the commissioning process considerations. So first of all, you all need to decide that you want to have new construction or renovation commissioning for those, or you want to have existing building which are not going any new construction or renovation, and you want to have commissioning happen in those buildings. The overall steps and approaches are the same, although the outcomes and the minute details in how it is accomplished, and I'll explain that in later slides. So very important is to define the CX program. CX stands for Commissioning Program Objectives. What is the primary objective? What is the secondary objective? So the primary objectives could be energy saving and comfort improvement. The secondary objective could be ensuring that the maintenance and operations staff is up to speed on how to maintain these buildings if they're integral part of the commissioning process. So you can define those objectives. The other important thing is that what the scope of the project needs to be defined. What systems to commission, to what extent, and what are the reporting requirements? How do you all want to accomplish that? And most importantly, that you got to do some budget allocation for the process. Before I dig into the various type of commissionings and their applications in various scenarios, I just wanted to go over some common terminology that you will see when you're looking at the commissioning reports. So I'll just quickly go over some of the important ones. CX stands for commissioning. CXA stands for commissioning authority. OPR for owner project requirements, which is normally developed by the owner, and it has a review and input by the commissioning provider. So the OPR would be owner projects requirement. That typically is a document that the owner develops, and it gives it to the design team to make sure that their overall, whatever the owner is expecting is being addressed. The basis of design document and design intent is typically developed by the design team, basically outlining what are their overall philosophy and what kind of systems they're going to be designing for. And that's something that usually the owner or the commissioning agent would review. The other thing you will see in the commissioning process is a description about system verification checks, which is sometimes referred to as SVC. And these are primarily checks that are developed by the commissioning agent and provided to the contractors so they could check their systems, fill those forms up, and return it to them before you can do a testing of the systems. Some people call them pre-functional checks also, and so just something to keep in mind. The FPT, which stands for Functional Performance Testing, is a project system testing criteria based on the design documents if it was new construction. And if it's an existing building, then that is a separate discussion that I'll go over a little bit later on. But for mostly new constructions, is this you develop a system sequence of operation testing that meets the design intent. FPT cannot start until SVC is complete, so that's important. The contractor must complete those forms saying, okay, they are ready or close to ready for the functional testing of the systems, and then you can start the process up. Typically, the commissioning agent at that point in time will take a quick look at the spot check some of the systems and those forms just to make sure in the field that they are really ready. Then typically the functional performance test will identify potential problems that physical inspection cannot detect. A lot of time that will happen. So just need to make sure that everyone has a good understanding of it. And the CX issue log, this is very important. So this is not an issue log or a punch list that is developed by the AE team. This is independent commissioning issue log and mostly is developed and maintained by the commissioning provider. And that is a result of their on-site observation, their functional testing. If any issues are identified, they are in a specific spreadsheet form typically, and they are distributed by the commissioning agent to the design team, to the construction team, to the owner basically, and it identifies what the problem was, who's the potential responsible party that needs to take an action on it. And then it keeps track of all that throughout the commissioning process to make sure that all items are addressed. O&M manuals, self-explanatory, maintenance and operation manual. And normally you will make sure that the warranty, the design intent, the frequency of maintenance and operation kind of issues are addressed over there. IECC, there's a lot of references in the commissioning documents to that, and that stands for International Energy Conservation Code. Currently, most of the cities and the state is using 2018, and some are using 2021. The state has IECC 2018, but some of the jurisdictions have already moved on to 2021 IECC. And ASHRAE stands for American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning. So, and that they normally develop standards and procedures, and those standards are almost always referenced in the codes, basically. So, although it's a standard, but they're referenced in the code. Types of commissioning. So what I wanted to do was give you all a broad overview of what a new construction commissioning and what is existing construction commissioning and what are the steps involved and how to go around by deciding on what's the best course of action. So the new construction and renovation commissioning would primarily be involved where you have to just make sure. Keep in mind that International Energy Conservation Code, IECC, has got some commissioning requirement mandated by code. Although this has been mandated by code, I think since 2012, but a lot of jurisdictions did not realize that, and I think it was by time 2015 and 18, a lot of jurisdictions are actually requiring documentation to close the project out. You have to fulfill some forms and provide some information on what type of commissioning was done for them to close the permits or to issue certificate of occupancy on a lot of cases. So now there's a code mandated, and I have few slides that specifically will go into that aspect of commissioning, basically. Fundamental commissioning, you will hear this word quite a few times, or basic commissioning. Mostly I refer to as fundamental commissioning as something that's required by the code, so you need to make sure you've done that. Enhanced commissioning means various things for various people. It is important to kind of define that and have some sort of a logical discussion on what an enhanced commissioning is. Typically, the lead projects will have a definition for what they consider a fundamental commissioning and enhanced commissioning, and I will go over that with you all in next few slides. And a lot of time, people just do construction phase commissioning. If it is a small renovation or it's a chiller replacements or something, not a major construction project. And even in a major construction projects, people have done construction phase commissioning, which is mostly concerned and included on the projects when the project is started into construction. Typically, nowadays, the expectations are that you will have design phase commissioning, you will have construction phase commissioning, and then also post acceptance or the warranty phase, basically. So key thing to keep in mind is that the planning, scheduling, scope development, and budgeting are all essential consideration and elements basically for the commissioning process. So there has to be a discussion on all these items in order to develop a scope, in order to make sure that whatever your needs are satisfied. So that will be the new construction commissioning. Basically. Then in existing building commissioning, you will see a terminology used called retro commissioning, which is RCX, which primarily involves, assessment of the building. There is no design documents or there is no design professional involved at that point in time. This is buildings that are already operations and currently in service that you want to commission. And retro commissioning is typically referred to for a facility that's being commissioned for the first time. Then there is in existing buildings, there is a continuous commissioning, which is A&M process basically for existing building, and primarily that type of commissioning is focused on HVAC and controls optimization. Some people have ongoing commissionings and they've got their own definition for ongoing commissioning. The way I perceive the ongoing commissioning is that once the commissioning has happened, you have developed a plan of action, and ideally in an existing building at that point in time, you have also involved the operations and maintenance staff. So you define some roles and responsibility for them to continue some of the things that were installed, that were implemented basically. And recommissioning is specifically for a facility that has been previously commissioned, but normally, you need to revisit after a couple of years and recommission that building to make sure it's working as intended. And again, just like new construction commissioning, you still need to look into the planning, scheduling, scope development, budgeting, and these are all essential consideration for existing building commissioning also. So new construction and renovation commissioning and existing building commissioning. The general way of thinking and going about doing some of these things is the same. It's just that the minute details and how you implement these things have got some differences, and we'll go over all that shortly. So new construction and renovation commissioning. So this used to be very predominant question. At least I would say a couple of years ago when commissioning was fairly new, newly introduced to new construction and renovation projects. Why do we need special program for commissioning the building? We have good design professionals, we got project managers, we've got good contractors. Shouldn't the building work like it is supposed to? So this used to be the first questions that used to be asked a couple of years ago, but not anymore, as people have become more and more familiar with the construction, with the commissioning process. So things to keep in mind is that the increased complexity of the building systems has primarily generated the need for new construction. There are technological advances, interaction between the systems that has to be taken into account, increased coordination between various trades. And I can give you an example. For example, you're putting an HVAC and then you're putting HVAC controls. So there are already HVAC contractor, control contractor, and electrical contractor involved. But at the same time, when it will interface with the fire alarm system for fire alarm shutdown, all of a sudden you got a third trade involved over there, also a fourth trade by that time. So a lot of time these trades come into the buildings at different times. They've got their own milestones to accomplish, and sometimes the communication doesn't happen at the right time. So that's why as more complex system and the system integrating with each other, commissioning kind of plays a role over there to kind of have facilitate that process. So the fast track design and construction schedules, owner have been requesting, fast track design and construction. That's all good, but it's also, provides an opportunity for errors and stuff like that. So something to keep in mind. There are demands for improved indoor air quality and comfort, basically, and that's important. The Energy Code has mandated some of these requirements, commissioning requirements. And if you have lead buildings, they've got a specific points allocated for what they want you to accomplish if you want to get certain type of recognition, basically, over there. So I'll go through all that. And most importantly, other than recognition and so forth, sometimes the owners have commitment to energy efficient buildings, and they're not going for any specific recognition, but they just want to make sure that they've got energy efficient building operations. So that's something to just keep in mind. These are just a few things why new construction or renovation commissioning can play an important role in mitigating some of these issues. I saw this. I saw this photo a couple of years ago. The source of this photo at that point in time was AABC Commissioning Group, and nowadays with the complexity of the systems and design features and so forth, you will see a lot of people and contractor looking at the plans, and sometimes even the engineers may have missed something basically in the design process. So literally, the commissioning is a quality control kind of a process. Basically, it's not a substitute for anything else. It's a process in which you could actually minimize some of the confusion and get things accomplished. Summary of commissioning activities and what are the steps involved in the commissioning, and this is for new construction and renovation commissioning. So typically there'll be a pre-design phase. Ideally you will have commissioning agent on board, but typically it doesn't happen. Normally the commissioning agent will come on board that the design team has been hired, or if there's a construction management at risk, or if it's a design build contract, so they will have the whole team. And at that point in time, the commissioning provider will come into the picture. So in the design phase, the commissioning provider will do design review if that is in their scope, basically. So that's a good discussion to have. And typically, a commissioning issue log for design phase will be developed in order to make sure that all the issues that were identified have been tracked if that was in the scope of the commissioning agent, and preparation of CX plan and specification for the project. So they will develop commissioning specification that will go into the contract document, so the contractor knows what his roles and responsibilities are, and those documents typically will be handed over to the project design team, which they will incorporate that into the specifications over there. Typically might be too early, but sometime you will start thinking of developing the system verification checklist. You will also start thinking about fundamental or functional performance test checklist development. So you start that process, but in reality, those processes will more be in the construction phase, and then the system checks or the SVCs or the pre-functional that were developed will be handed over to the contractor for them to start their process when they're close to completion. And the functional test will be developed by the commissioning agent for the verification process will be in the construction phase. So the construction phase, you have a CX implementation strategy. You have to work with all the team members, including the contractors, working as a team and making sure the commissioning agent realizes who the parties are and how to communicate with them is very important. So that's something to keep in mind, that the commissioning agent should have some experience on the design and the construction aspect of it. It just makes things go a little easier. There's a good coordination, and the most important thing is that during the construction phase, a commissioning issue log will be developed for tracking the issues that were identified by the commissioning agent. And there'll be spot checks, review of the reports, control point verifications, test and balance contractor report review, and primarily documentation and making sure that any issues that were identified are being addressed, basically. So the commissioning issue log is maintained, as I mentioned earlier, and maintained by the commissioning agent, and he's also involved in distribution of that and collecting that information and making sure that those items, any open items, are closed and addressed. So typically you'll go from there if the scope is to work in the acceptance and post-acceptance phase. The acceptance phase will normally be where you will carry out the functional performance test. You will review make sure the training is all done. And at that point in time, a preliminary commissioning report might be developed at that point in time. If the scope involved commissioning agent involved in the post-acceptance phase, then you'll carry out some off-season tests, basically for in the heating and cooling season. And any items identified during the post-acceptance phase will become warranty items, and you want to make sure that those are addressed by the contractor while things are still under warranty. And then at that point in time, you will update the documentation and do a final commissioning report. Although if the post-acceptance phase was not in the scope of the commissioning agent and it was primarily for substantial completion and acceptance of phase only, then the commissioning report will be developed at that point in time also, and that will be the final report, and it will identify what was done. And at that point in time, the commissioning agent more than likely can simulate the heating and the cooling season test if he needs to, basically. So these are the test processes involved in the activities involved for new construction, whether it's major renovation or is it major new construction. The steps are very similar. The scope depends on what you all have agreed with the commissioning agent. This is an important thing to realize. A lot of time people are not sure what systems to commission. So the scope of work is usually determined by the owner in consultation with professionals to meet code requirements at a minimum and project-specific mandates. So the mechanical systems understood: HVAC controls, the plumbing systems, the electrical system, lighting and lighting controls, the switch gears, transformers, building envelope. Commissioning is also becoming more popular. Specialty systems commissioning like fire alarm, voice data, standby power generation, and there could be others also. The key thing to keep in mind is that the code mandates the systems that I have highlighted, or they're in different color, basically. Those are the systems that are requiring commissioning. The rest of the systems is depending on what your goal and objectives are. Typically on a federal projects, they go beyond the minimum over there, but mostly the commissioning process will be primarily zoomed on HVAC control, lighting and lighting controls, basically. It's important to keep in mind that the commissioning is nothing new. Commissioning has been going on for a while. And primarily it was generated because there were a lot of issues on the HVAC and the controls aspects of the HVAC. As a result of that, commissioning became a popular tool to kind of control that aspect of it and do a better job at it. So, uh, one important thing is that the commissioning specifications will be developed by the commissioning engineer and therefore inclusion in the contract documents. And you want to do that because the contractor need to be aware of it, that he has to allocate some time and effort to work with the commissioning agent in doing some testing and follow-up testing and so on and so forth. Now, commissioning agent is not a substitute for the normal inspections that happen. Basically, and that's very important to keep in mind. If for example, if there's a fire alarm, the authority to do those inspection and acceptance is actually the fire department of the city, and they are the authority. In that case, commissioning agent will just be accompanying them if that was in the scope. Commissioning objective and benefits, basically, and we're still talking about new construction and so forth. So I just want to make sure we keep that in mind. Important thing is that the objective of the commissioning process is to minimize building turnover transition period. Okay. Now that is important. Ideally, we would say that we will have zero issues and the building turnover will be the day after the contractor said he's all done, but it doesn't happen. So the goal of the commissioning is to be realistic, and I think it's a realistic goal is to minimize that transition period, and that's very important. You could be dedicating your staff dealing with issues for the next 3, 4, 5, 6 months, or you could have the commissioning agent making sure that those issues are addressed earlier on, and instead of taking 6 or 7 or 8 months, they are all addressed in the 90 or 120 days, basically from the date of completion. So that's important, minimizing that transition period, basically. Then objective is to have impact of energy and operating cost. That's very important aspect of it. Except optimized buildings, that's important. Minimized post-occupancy repair issues. Hopefully that could be accomplished over there. Now, if you were applying for lead points, then you would get some lead points, and I go through that in the next few slides also. And hopefully you will have increased occupant and owner satisfaction, and then making sure that the extension of equipment or system life cycle is better as a result of commissioning. For example, if you have identified that there was a control valve that was hunting, opening and closing, you will not see that basically unless someone has done some research and looked at the data and did some data analysis, and they will address fixing that hunting problem. As a result of that, there'll be less wear and tear, basically. So that's just an example over there. And just to make sure that quality assurance approach resulting in significant value to the owner. So there has to be a value to the owner, and people have found out that the commissioning process do have a value to the owner, and that's why it's becoming more and more accepted and popular and now mandated through codes. Industry sources indicate on average the operating cost of a commissioning building range from 8 to 20% below that of a non-commissioned building. This was a GSA study done a couple of years ago. So some of the things that you will see in the commissioning process will be hopefully the commissioning agent, if it is involved in the construction phase, they might be able to identify a few issues that could be addressed over there. And then, so some of these are just examples. For example, a rooftop unit, a thermal scan was done, and they see this slight leak at the seam of the transition over there. So that was identified as a repair item. In a couple of places where they were still doing chill water piping, two different disciplines were working, and the mechanical discipline, didn't had enough room on the top because the plumbing vent was running through it. So the mechanic decided to just invert the pump, and that's now how it's supposed to work properly. So he did it just because there was not enough room above there, and just had it inverted. And sometimes through the commissioning process, you will run into chill water valve, hot water valve that are leaking internally, and there's a specific kind of a analysis done to identify those leaky valves, which results in more energy use. So those are the type of things that will happen in the commissioning process that will become, that will be very useful. And these are just a few examples over there. What is the commissioning team? We need to talk about that basically. So there's a commissioning provider. Mostly on new construction renovation projects, owners have preferred an independent commissioning provider, over there. And then you'll have a design professional. You will have the owner, construction, and maintenance and operation department. I like to stress that the maintenance and operation department need to be pulled into some of these, especially during the close to the construction phase, because they could really get some training, and they can also be eyes and ears for the commissioning agent. You'll have prime and subcontractors, construction managers, general contractor, HVAC controls contractor, test and balance contractors, and other disciplines. So that will comprise the commissioning team basically, and then the commissioning agent will be pulling in and communicating with those for the system that he's commissioning based on the information provided to him. So the team is a full team, and we need to make sure that everyone knows what the team is composed of and who's the authority basically for commissioning and who's the authority for design. Some misconception about commissioning is very important. Commissioning is not covered under traditional design professional services. It is also not testing, adjusting, and balancing. You still have to have test and balance contractor. The commissioning agent in that case would be spot checking and reviewing their reports. Verification of contractors' QC process. Need to keep in mind that the design professionals are responsible for the punch list and so forth. So those responsibilities need to stay where they are. Also keep in mind in the construction phase commissioning or the commissioning for new construction and renovation, the commissioning agent is just one of the is not a design professional. So if there is any recommendation that has to be proved that will result in some changes, it has to be proved by the design professional. And so it's not a substitute for construction inspections. They still need to happen. It's not a substitute for construction management. It's also not a substitute for MEP system coordination. So important to keep these things in mind. I will go into existing building commissioning. Primarily, it has got the same steps as we discussed for the new construction, but in existing building commissioning, the primarily emphasis will be on HVAC and HVAC controls, basically, and some of the topics that we covered or items that we discussed in the new construction would also apply over here. But keep in mind, there's no design professional, so engineer is the design professional, not the design professional, but is the commissioning agent over there. Same kind of processes and methodologies, and the need for existing commissioning is explained over there. Again, the team over here is going to be facility staff, MNO, and commissioning engineer, basically, and then applicable buildings with no major renovations. So existing building commissioning doesn't need to have major renovation projects done over there. It is just commissioning the project, the building as it is, and it applies engineering fundamentals. So I think for existing building commissioning, fundamental engineering practices are very important, and understanding of those, and it's important that must establish a process and allocate some fund to address issues identified during commissioning. There might be repair items identified, so there must be a process for someone to do that. I'm going to very briefly go over this. It is very similar to the new construction commissioning. You can just replace everything, take the design professional out. You will have the assessment phase in which you assess the existing building. You will have the planning phase in which you will plan and execute some of your steps over there. You will go into the implementation phase in which you're going to do actual implementation of the measures that you're recommending. You'll do some testing over there. Then there'll be a handoff phase in which you will bring in the maintenance and operations staff and explain to them how some improvements were made, basically. And those hopefully will continue with ongoing commissioning phase, and you will have a plan developed and given to the staff, basically, that they can fine tune some of those buildings, although they can engage the commissioning agent to do some of that stuff too. So basically, these are 5-6 steps, very similar to the new construction, but then again, the goal and objectives are slightly different. Just wanted to give you an example over there, a very quick one. The above was it. So it is important that the controls are well understood by the commissioning agent. So this is just an example of one of the projects that we were kind of involved in which there was a sequence modification. The above sequence is what they had before. Basically, it was a constant DP set point that the chiller was being controlled at, and then a review of the modification of the existing control sequence was done primarily to optimize the operation for energy savings and also build in some safety factors. So the key point over there is that uh, controls is an important aspect in existing building commissioning, and we need to be aware of that. Another important thing in the existing building commissioning is that you must kind of see how things were running before, and you need to document how things are running now. This could be done in new construction also, but it is more prevalent and important in the existing building, where you show the differences on how you made any sequence changes and how did it impact the operations. And these are some good examples over there, basically, in which now, as a result of that, less energy will be used. So presenting this information in the final commissioning report is kind of important in existing building commissioning. Existing building commissioning, primarily reason is energy savings. You could have payback from 1 to 5 years, improved occupant comfort. You could have potential system upgrades identified, operating staff training is enhanced, and the need to repair is conducted, basically. So some of the advantages of benefits of existing building commissioning. Well, I just will have a few slides on this, which is continuous commissioning. This is continuous commissioning is a process developed by A&M Systems, and primarily it is done at existing buildings, and its primary focus is HVAC and control optimization. They have seen, in energy reductions from 10 to 25%. The philosophy of existing building commissioning is the same, except that there might be some specific tools and so forth used by different commissioning agents. This is a license process for existing buildings, and then I'll go over a few steps over there. Just like any other existing building commissioning, the steps are very similar. Although they're developed in more detail over here, but the same kind of applies to any existing building commissioning process. The phase one is the development. You identify, inform, and assess, basically. So you have a screening phase. And the second phase is implementation and verification phase, in which you develop a CC plan, you develop some baselines, develop M&V protocols, which is measurement and verification protocols. Then you do the measurements and further develop CC plan. You identify this repair items. Again, just like existing building commissioning, they will identify the repair items that needs to be fixed. You implement the measures. You document the comfort and savings improvement. You conduct workshops, and you keep the commissioning ongoing, basically either through the facility staff or to the commissioning agent that was hired over there. The key thing to remember is that this is very similar to existing building commissioning, but it is more focused on optimization of the HVAC system, and the complex systems can really benefit from this process. Just like existing building commissioning, you want to be able to show the improvements made, the energy savings done. So this is and I just give you an example. For example, on the left side, this is how the chill water pump with VFD was operating before. And when the optimization sequences were implemented, you'll see a drop in the variable speed drives, basically, and then you will also see a result was that you will have energy saving associated with it. So these are some other similar projects. Very important is that these documentations and these, mostly a lot of this data will come out of your EMS control systems, and then the control systems data, you download that and use further analysis on that and show how the systems improve, basically. Very quickly over here, but very important, basically. And there's been a lot of confusion about this thing. So I'll go over the energy code, which is IECC, and what is mandated in energy code. There's not much of a difference between IECC 2018 and 2021, except that in 2021, it is called Maintenance Information and System Commissioning. In 2018, it used to be just called System Commissioning, basically, which is also in code IECC 2015 has the same thing too. So requirement for operation O&M documentation information was added in the IECC code mandate commissioning in 2021. So this is a good question. What is the minimum size that I need where I have to have commissioning in place? Of course, you can have commissioning for without any minimum size, but if you're just concerned with what the code requires, so then the code requires commissioning on all for buildings, with the exception that you have a total mechanical system cooling capacity of less than and I'll just say the 40 tons of cooling capacity, and the combined service water heating and space heating capacity of less than 600,000 BTUs per hour, basically. So, and then individual dwelling and sleeping units are exempt. So if you have a building that does not have the system capacity for HVAC and the plumbing system, heating system is less than what is identified over there, you're not required to have commissioning done for that aspect of it, basically. So the commissioning, the code requires a commissioning plan. It requires system adjusting and balancing, making sure verification of tab has been done, and the sections that I'm identifying, these are the sections in the code that specifically talk about these topics and go more into detail on those things. The code IECC commissioning requires functional testing of controls in HVAC service water heating, and if any economizers. So the functional performance test is an important aspect, basically, of the overall commissioning process, which typically happens in the construction phase. In addition, most of jurisdictions nowadays, like Austin, San Antonio, larger school, Houston, and other Dallas, etc., they are requiring that a preliminary commissioning report must be submitted, and they are requiring that submittal for acceptance, for occupancy acceptance. So very important that a preliminary report be developed, which will identify that the commissioning was done, who the commissioning agent was, what were his qualifications, and what are the systems that were commissioning and what commissioned, and what are the issues that might still be open that were not closed. It's just a preliminary report, but there is some documentation that has to be done for that purposes. Also included in the commissioning process over there, this is irrespective of whether you have to do HVAC control or controls commissioning, is a lighting control. Lighting have become a little bit more sophisticated and complicated nowadays. They've got low voltage lighting system, lighting control system, making it a little complicated. There could be discussions involved earlier on how to make it less complicated, but those are discussion for another time. But at the same time, the code requires that if there are, if you have 7 or fewer sensors, occupancy sensor, you need to test them all. If there are more than 7 sensors, then test 10% of each control type and a unique space type. So that's important to know that this code doesn't require you to test every one of them. Some people prefer that be done, and that could be part of the scope, but the code is requiring that you test 10% of unique types, basically. If there were time control switch, which could be controls of the lighting controls through EMS, your control system, or a dedicated lighting control system, then testing of that is required. Daylight responsiveness controls testing is required. A lot of the new codes are requiring daylight controls integrated into lighting controls, so testing of that is required, and making sure that documentation is provided for design drawings, O&M manuals, and commissioning report is submitted for the lighting control part of it also. So that is primarily what the code requires and mandates. And a lot of jurisdictions are actually requiring reports, making sure that this aspect of the commissioning process or this aspect of the code enforcement, which was typically a couple of years ago not that popular or known, is not ignored anymore. So that's important. This is an important and interesting topic, basically commissioning for lead projects. Okay. Now remember, a lot of people say, I want lead commissioning. There is no such thing as lead commissioning. In my opinion, it is if somebody wants lead commissioning, um, primarily what they're telling you is that we want to attain certain level of points, and the commissioning process identified in the lead is primarily referencing the standards that are already out there, which will be the energy code commissioning and other aspects of ASHRAE basically are going to be referenced over there. But mostly it is applying that. You don't have to be LEED certified or anything like that to provide commissioning over there. Typically, the design team on the larger projects might have, or the owner might have a LEED certified professional that might be. So the commissioning agent in that case will do his functions that are required over there and would submit those to the design team or to whoever that entity is that will submit those reports to them. So primarily, LEED, which is Leadership in Energy Environmental Design, projects go through a verification and review process and are awarded points that correspond to the level of LEED certification. So you can have platinum, gold, silver, and certified. LEED energy and atmosphere, there's a 6 or 7 credit areas. This is where majority of the points are. And keep in mind that the commissioning documentation fall under this energy and atmosphere credit points, basically. So LEED defines you for any building to be LEED certified, you need to have fundamental commissioning done. And I will just simplify this thing. Fundamental commissioning is a process for what I identified in the energy code, but it has a few more reporting requirements over here that have to be given to the LEED professional. And it's primarily the process in which you do the same process that you do normally in the commissioning that are standard in the ASHRAE guide or they are standard in the code requirements. So you get to do all of those, and there's no exception. A couple of years ago, they used to have point for this, but now since the basic code mandate, you have to do that. There's some additional reporting requirements specifically to read. That's the LEED agency, but that's the only difference. Then they have envelope building enclosure commissioning, basically, and primarily the role over there for the building enclosure part of it is almost like a third-party reviewer that will be reviewing some testing that might have been done and some follow-up over there. There's a thing called enhanced commissioning, basically, is all items and fundamental commissioning, plus few more things, and which could be review of submittals, seasonal testing, 10-month follow-up, and developing an ongoing commissioning plan. That will be called enhanced commissioning. And then monitoring-based commissioning is enhanced commissioning plus developing monitoring-based procedures and identify points to be measured, evaluated to assess performance of energy and water consuming systems. So primarily, it is more data-oriented at that point in time. So just important things to keep in mind that fundamental commissioning is required now. It's not an additional point or anything like that. So you have, and this is an important question also, that, what are the type of systems that are required for commissioning? So as I mentioned earlier, the emphasis on is what are the systems that consume energy, which will be HVAC control, domestic water heating system, lighting and daylighting controls, if there were any on-site renewable energy systems, and building envelope enclosure commissioning is an optional item over there also. So if your question was, that I want lead commissioning, you need to realize that the lead commissioning is primarily the standard commissioning system that are traditionally commissioned over there, and it is additional some reporting requirement on those systems. But that is important thing to keep in mind as to what kind of systems are covered under the lead commissioning systems, basically. So points. So for fundamental commissioning, it's required. You have to have that if you want to have LEED certified building. You can have envelope commissioning and it will give you 2 points. Enhanced commissioning, which is primarily HVAC and lighting controls, or any renewable, basically, you will get 3 points for that. You can have enhanced and monitoring based commissioning, which is more data oriented. You'll get 4 points for that. You could have enhanced commissioning and envelope commissioning combined together. You get 5 points for that. And if you have done enhanced and monitoring based plus envelope commissioning, you get 6 points for that. Realistically, I've seen most of the people doing the fundamental well, that's required, and they've taken enhanced commissioning and then maybe added a building envelope component to it. So 5 points is typically what people try to go for if they're doing anything more than a regular certified LEED building, silver or gold or platinum, basically. So that's important to just keep in mind. Very important that you must select a commissioning provider that is qualified and that has experience with construction, HVAC, and control systems and has got good communication skills. Some require professional engineers, and there's a good reason for it, but at a minimum, they need to be a certified firm with a commissioning authority. There was a lot of confusion about in the beginning. There was no specific standards or no agency that will accredit commissioning agents, basically. So this is now the gold standard. Commissioning provided is accredited by DOE Better Building Program or ANSI accredited, and you must see those two certifications, or if there's a commissioning provider providing those services, and the building commissioning recognized by Better Building Program or ANSI certified are these AABC Commissioning Group, ASHRAE, Building Commissioning Association, and National Environmental Balancing Bureau. So these are the 4 entities that are actually right now being qualified or certified by DOE Better Buildings and ANSI certified. Again, the continuous commissioning is a license specifically with A&M systems over there. So what are the costs? This is a good question. People ask, what's the cost of commissioning? And I wish I could just tell you this is what it is, but I'm afraid I can't do that. You have to develop a scope of work and then negotiate the fees, basically, and it depends on complexity, systems, and time and effort base. Sometimes fees are developed based on not to exceed basis. Sometimes they are developed on percentage of construction cost, and a lot of times they're developed on dollar per square foot. So those are the different ways you can look into the cost aspect of it. The cost of commissioning, this was a study done a couple of years ago by Portland Energy Conservation Group, basically, and it gives you cost per square foot, basically, and you will realize the smaller the building, the higher the cost per square foot. The larger the complex building is, the smaller is less cost per square foot. And then also you have to differentiate whether it's a complex system, simple system, so on and so forth. I would say that the commissioning cost could vary anywhere by between 50 cents to $2 a square foot, basically. So that's something to just keep in mind. Again, you have to develop the scope and what the services needs are, and ideally a time-based effort will be developed basically to quantify the cost. These are some important, not important, but these are some resources that will be available. So when we issue this, you all can click on those links and it will give you basically resources that you can go and further research some of these topics that were discussed by us. I think we are almost at the closing time for this right here. So if anyone, I think we can take a couple of minutes extra. If there are any specific questions at this point in time, feel free to ask. You can put them in the chat, or we will unmute. And if there is anyone wants to speak and say something, they can go ahead and do that. Again, this presentation was from SECO Schools and Local Government Program, which is and Lashard Menace is the PM for that. But my information is out there. There could be follow-up questions. Please feel free to reach out via that email address, or you could call me and I can answer some of those questions. I'm looking at the chat. It doesn't look like there are any major questions at this point in time. We'll take a quick look at it one more time. But again, as I mentioned, please, normally questions come later on to your mind, so feel free to reach out and be glad to go over it in more specific details. Again, the topic is very complex and it's very detailed. Putting it in 1 hour makes it a little hard, basically, but hopefully with this, at least I've answered some of your very fundamental, basic kind of questions about the scopes and the lead commissioning and the existing building commissioning, continuous commissioning, and new construction commissioning. So hopefully, and especially what is required in the energy code nowadays. So hopefully I've covered all that for you, but I will be glad to answer any questions. And if there are no questions, and it doesn't look like there are any specific questions, I will take off. And I would like, oh, good, there's a question. There is a question. Sorry. Go ahead. Oh, thank you for the compliment. It wasn't a question, it was a compliment, and this is from United ISD. Oh, thank you, Enrique. If there are no more questions, since we are 2 minutes past our allocated time, it's important that I respect that, so I will get off over here. But again, I would very much encourage you all to reach out to me with any specific question, and I'll be glad to go in more details on these topics. Thank you for joining, and best of luck.